Hey, this is Megan McDuffie. I'm a video game composer, recording artist, and music producer, and you're listening to Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. Watch your step, trust your fear.
The Kasanova Podcast, the #1 podcast in Hawaii, is brought to you by these contributors on Patreon. If you'd like to see more content like this more often, as well as more podcast reviews, impressions, early access releases, live streams, and original content, then consider becoming a patron today. All right, and welcome everyone to another episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. I'm your host, Mekel Kasanova, and I'm coming at you with another phenomenal podcast. And in this episode, I've got the honor and privilege of interviewing not one, but two phenomenal guests, and that is Adam Tierney. He is the business development manager and game director at Wayforward Technologies, and also Bannon Rudis, who is the assistant director and combat director for River City Girls. Now, it is an honor because not only am I a huge fan of Wayforward Technologies, but I'm a fan of the properties that they put out. And River City Girls is such a special project to me because as a fan of River City, the franchise, Double Dragon, and more, it's just simply phenomenal. And on this episode, I get to dive into more than just the surface level things, but talk about the technical aspects of the games and so much more. So if you're ready to do it, I'm ready to do it. Let's go ahead and introduce Adam and Bannon onto the show. All right, and welcome everyone to another episode of Hawaii's #1 podcast, the Kasanova Podcast. I'm your host, Mekel Kasanova, and I have the true honor and privilege of interviewing the two directors of River City Girls from Wayforward, Adam Tierney and Bannon Rudis. Go ahead and introduce yourself, guys. It is such an honor to have you on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having us. So, Bannon, this is Adam, and I've got Bannon next to me. We're both directors here at Wayforward, and what that means is we basically kind of oversaw production of River City Girls. We also designed it, wrote it, anything that you love in the game or hate in the game we're probably responsible for. But yeah, it's very similar to kind of like director role in a movie. It's this is the role that puts everything together. So we that was us on this, and I hope you guys for whoever's had a chance to play it like what we put together.
Any of your hate DMs though, send directly to Adam Tierney.
Yeah, I'll take those.
Oh man, I mean, honestly, what is there to hate about the game? The game, like, for me, I'm an old school gamer. I grew up with Atari and the NES, so I grew up with the original River City game and Renegade and Double Dragon and Kung Fu. So for me, like, playing,
I like this guy already.
and also Bad Dudes. It's like, playing this game.
You gotta save the president.
Right? And then eat, have a cheeseburger after. But it's like, it's crazy because like when I got the review code for the game and I started playing it, I'm like, this right here is a love letter to all old school brawlers or side scrolling beat 'em ups, or like we used to say in the day, belt scrollers. It's everything. Like there's honestly nothing, and and I'm not trying to just blow smoke up your guys' butt. I'm being completely honest, and I said
blow away.
And I said it in my review. Like this game is the only thing I have that I think would be awesome with it would be like having online co-op. But other than that, from the story, the gameplay, the graphics, the music, the voice acting, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the game. And the Easter eggs. I saw you had Linda and the Bobo, and like I'm over here like, yo, how many people are gonna recognize that? Like, how many old school gamers gonna be like, "Hey, I remember that character." You guys did fantastic. I love.
It was funny, yeah. Like a lot of that stuff too came from our Japanese publisher, Arc System Works. People know them from like Blaze Blue and all their fighting games like Dragon Ball Fighter Z. And once we got going on the game, our producers over there were like, "Hey, go ahead and add this character. What about this character?" And they wanted Skullmageddon in there, and they wanted like super obscure characters from other Technos games like Combat Tribes.
Yeah,
even gave us like, oh, if you could remake this music track and this one. So yeah, it was really fun just because all those worlds, Double Dragon, Kunio-kun, all these obscure Technos games are all connected. So to be able to just like play with all the characters and locations and Easter eggs from those was really awesome.
It is kind of like a extended Technos-verse kind of game.
Yeah. And that was one of the things too, like, I was talking to some of my friends that are like asking like about those references. Like there's the one guy from Combat Tribes that I was like, yeah, and I was like, holy crap, you guys went you reached way back and pulled that out. And a lot of my friends are like, who is that? Even my wife, when she was playing it, she's like, who is that? I'm like, and I went and pulled it up. I was like, here, I've got the original game.
He's lost a little bit of muscle mass over the years.
Yeah, there's also one of the other shopkeepers is, I think her full name is Martha Splatterhouse. Yeah. She's the electric woman. Yeah, she was one of the villains from Combat Tribes, I think.
Right? And it's just amazing. Like it's so rare to see games these days that have such callbacks to the franchises that paved the way for what we have now, and the fact that you guys did that, man, hats off to you guys. That was amazing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was really, and it was fun to, we really wanted to reinvent everything and like ride that line between nostalgia and bringing in new gamers. So, for somebody who's never played these games, who's never played a Double Dragon or a River City Kunio-kun game, they just see a bunch of wacky characters that hopefully they're digging. For people that have played these games, going back to the 80s, they get that like wave of nostalgia and they could recognize this character and this character. So that was kind of our goal, was to make something that would stand up on its own, but would just be like, taken to a whole other level for anybody that's played these games before.
Definitely. And, and that's the whole other thing too, is like anyone who, like my wife, she's never played any of the Double Dragon or River City games or Combat Tribes or Bad Dudes. I have to mention Bad Dudes because I love that title.
Yep.
But she's never played any of those, and when she was playing this, she's like, she kept asking me. She's like, "Do I need to know any of the background?" I'm like, No. I'd say it's kind of like a soft reboot, I would say, of the Nekketsu or Kunio franchise. So.
Yeah, it's kind of, the Japanese title calls it like Gaiden, like a side story. So, they embraced it, and they made sure, Arc System Works, because they own the brand now, they made sure that it lined up. So like if you watch as you play the game and characters are like, I don't go to this school and I'm from this part of town, like they made sure all of that was correct, and they were giving us like all the little factoids for there. But yeah, aside from that, they really just let us go wild, kind of rethinking each character.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So, like, when it comes to when you guys are in the planning process for River City Girls, like, was there anything that, like, how is the concept, like, when you decided to focus it on Kyoko and Masako instead of Kunio and Riki?
So that's another thing. So they've had about 50 games, and almost all of them star Kunio and Riki. So it's kind of a big deal that you're not starting the game playing as the boys in this one. And that was just, Wayforward tends to do games where we have a lot of female main characters. So that was the pitch. It's just like, hey, we saw this cool Super Nintendo game from Japan where it had Masako and Kyoko. What if we did a game all about them? What if it had this art style? What if it had this sort of humor to it? And Arc was on board. So we basically did like a little like 10-page pitch doc with some concept art. They really dug that, and then we just kept coming up with ideas back and forth, and they were interested, and Wayforward is interested, and then we dove into the full production.
Awesome. And with it's been, like you said, it's like over 50 titles with Kunio and Riki. So with River City Girls, is that is this also part of the canon storyline in the sense of, does it also tie in? Because I'm not sure if River City Ransom Underground ties into your guys' work, or if it's completely.
It does not. River City Ransom Underground is the game I made right before I got to Wayforward. That one is, I saw that more as into the future, even though the original one I consider to be placed in 19XX. This one is in the far future of also 19XX. Like nostalgia, the age of nostalgia, it never goes anywhere. The people do age in it, according to the creator of the game, however they want to make them however old. But other than that, it's supposed to be in the future, but it's still stuck in that era.
I think it was as we were kind of working with ARC and getting like a lesson on, all the different characters and stuff. I mean, Bannon went really deep on his game, and then they brought even crazier amounts of depth, ARC System Works, to our game in terms of like available characters and what we could reference. And lore, just all the lore stuff. But I don't know that the 50 games are like, very strictly sequels and this directly leads into this one. They're kind of just all these different crazy little adventures using the same characters. Some of them lead into others, but some of them are remakes. Some of them are kind of, more side stories. So there really wasn't, I think, that much to tap into in terms of like, well, this character was at this point then and this point then, and make sure that this doesn't happen before this. It does, at least as far as our involvement and working with ARC, it didn't feel like that level of nuance. It was more about like, how does Hiroshi act and how does Ricky act and how are they going to be in our game and what are they after? And they let us really play with that. Like, I mean, we have the rival girls, Hasabe and Mami are usually pretty sweet. I mean, most of the girls are pretty sweet in the traditional series. We wanted to make them more rivalry, so they're a little bit more bitter and kind of like, taunting rival type characters. And ARC was fine with it. They're just like, oh yeah, that seems cool. It's funny what you're doing with them. So there's a little bit of reinvention, but then as much as possible, we tried to kind of play homage to where these characters came from and a little bit of their histories.
Yeah, otherwise Bulova wouldn't be working at a store.
That was hilarious. And even Burnoff too, that cameo with Burnoff, I was like, wow, really?
Oh, thank you. That was one of the first things we came up with. I said, we have to have Burnoff specifically so he can do that stupid, weird little mask vanish thing.
Right.
That was one of the very first gags we came up with. And it's interesting, because we knew we didn't want to slow the player down, so all the story in the game is either cinematics that you can skip, or it's dialogue that happens as you go. So it never like freezes the gameplay. I think that's the only time in the game outside of like boss battle modes where we paused the gameplay, but it was just the gag was too good. So we're like, all right, well they can stop moving for 3 seconds so he can do his like dopey little vanishing act.
Oh man. So with when it came to down to like the combat system of the game, it really, like, I feel like it infused so much, like, from the original River City Ransom. I felt like there were a lot of aspects from River City Ransom Underground, Double Dragon Advance, Super Double Dragon or Return of Double Dragon. There was so much that went into that combat system that you guys have for it that I'm seeing people on Twitter, they're making combo compilations. They're talking about, oh, you can use this combo into that, and then here's the hitbox and the frame data. Like, has it really surprised you guys how deep people have gotten into that combat system?
Not really, because that is, so I've talked about this before where I do a design thing called Little Brother, Big Brother. Little Brother can just hit quick attack, and quick attack combos will end in a knockdown. So the enemy isn't just standing there taking hit after hit. But then there is Big Brother. Big Brother knows how to cancel and juggle and then air juggle, and then like he knows how to do the things Little Brother doesn't. Yeah. Little Brother is ignorant to the fact that he can do these air juggles or go into a throw and then follow up that throw with something else or the frame data, but he's having a great time. So Big Brother knows how to do more, but both of them are having a great time. But other than that, yeah, there is a lot of nuanced stuff that's in the combat that I didn't advertise. Like, we didn't say, like, oh, stone hands you can cancel in between each of the stone hand attacks into a heavy or another special. it's like, yeah, people will discover this, people will share their stuff, and yeah, I'm still pretty surprised what people can come up with, especially after playing the game for a year. I'm like, I didn't even know you could do that.
There's a lot of, I see people really getting into lately juggling and then loving the air takedown, like the slamming characters down.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, two of the things, Bannon did all of the combat design in the game. I just love what he and our lead animator Kay came up with. I think two of the things that you know, I think they nailed really well is, one, making the combat really funny and fun and engaging, especially when you play as like the Kyoko character. You know, some of her attacks, everybody talks about the dab. Love it or hate it. But a lot of the attacks are just very silly, and they really, you know, play up her goofy personality, and they play up the seriousness of the Masako character. So I love how much of their personality is in the attacks. And the other thing that we knew starting at the beginning was we didn't want players to struggle to pull off a move, especially after they're saving up and buying it. So, you know, it kind of is more along the lines of what Smash Brothers does, or even what Arc System Works, I noticed they were doing in games like their Dragon Ball game. They're very simple inputs. It's usually not deeper than like a direction plus one button. So even gamers that are not as fighting and brawler experienced, they can still pull off those moves. They're not going to be doing, you know, 15-second long crazy air juggle insta-kill things, but they can still buy a move and then be able to pull it off and have that sense of satisfaction.
And that kind of came down to, like, I loved Alien vs. Predator, the arcade. And I did take a lot of gameplay mechanics from that. How you kind of push through a crowd instead of standing completely still and idle, like in a fight game. But in that game, there were some moves where you press down up or something like that, or you do a fireball move. But I really loved what Dragon's Crown did. There's so much complex stuff you can do in that game with very simple controls.
Definitely. And okay, so so there's some inspiration from Dragon's Crown. There's some inspiration from other titles as well. So what else inspired it? Do we have some Streets of Rage and some Final Fight, or what else inspired it?
So one of the cool things about the River City world is it overlaps with other worlds, and the biggest one is Double Dragon. We had done Double Dragon Neon before, but I grew up, I mean, I've played through Double Dragon 2, I must have at least 100 times, and so, you know, I was really excited to see Bannon and Kay pulling in moves from that series in terms of the way that you're grabbing guys and kneeing them and throwing them over the shoulder. And, you know, I've always thought just the grab attack system in the early Double Dragons was one of the most satisfying combat systems. We also used it in one of our Batman games. So I loved seeing a blend of that and the River City stuff and some stuff from Underground, and just kind of throwing them all into a pot and mixing it up.
And not only that, but like when you are grabbing somebody, you will notice if there are enough enemies on the screen, somebody is pretty much lined up, kind of waiting in the shadows, waiting for you to throw that enemy at them. Because if you're just throwing an enemy just to throw them and they just land on nothing, it's fun, but it's a lot more fun to throw an enemy into another enemy.
Exactly. And same thing with the weapons. So in the traditional River City ransom style, you can swing a weapon or you can throw it. And, you know, the heavy weapons, they're pretty heavy. You got to really lean into it to kind of get them away for you, or else they'll just bop you on your own head. And that's so satisfying, throwing weapons and having them hit an enemy that's rushing you, throwing enemies into each other, grabbing enemies off the ground and using them as weapons. It's just a really fun blend of combat.
And smashing a weapon on them is pretty satisfying.
Yeah.
It actually does extra damage.
And you know I love the fact that for Masako, you guys gave her the hyper knee from Double Dragon 2 with the sound and the correct animation. I was in nostalgia heaven with that.
That was one of the first moves that was proven out in the first prototype, and yeah, you better believe we got that sound effect in there. There was no question about that.
Oh man, so you know, I have to ask, when it came to like deciding on what the OST should be like for the game and the overall style and aesthetic of the music to match the theme that you're going for with the character designs, how did you guys come up with that?
So we kind of just, you know, one of the things that we did early on is we knew we wanted to try out a lot of new blood on this game. So, Wayforward has a really long history of doing awesome pixel games. And I think if you look at the games, if you look at, some of the Shantae games and the Contra games and stuff, you can kind of spot like, oh, okay, they're probably using the same artist here and there. I wanted to make sure that this game really had its own identity. So we were trying out a lot of new artists, including music. And so we had a handful of musicians on the game, but the one who did the bulk of the tracks is named Megan McDuffie. And she just
interviewed her.
Destroyed it. Oh my God. She just went nuts on this soundtrack. Did over 50 songs, I think about 50 songs herself. And all of them are just so catchy. I've never worked on a game where I just constantly find myself humming the tunes from your own game, just, outside of work.
Right.
But she did great. She did full vocal songs. So the only thing that we really, decided at the beginning was we wanted the music to have a continuous beat so that it felt like the girls were kind of just like fighting their way through a club.
Yeah.
And then we already had signed Chipz-N to do the boss songs. And she does that very grungy, thick, heavy sort of like chiptune style. So we wanted somebody to come in a little more symphonic. And Megan was recommended to us, and it like the kind of synth pop style music that she did just matches everything in the visuals and the gameplay so well. We were excited, to work with her, but we were also just continuously blown away by what she came up with.
Yeah, it was just like a hit-making machine. Like every day there'd be a new song. Like, how is she making this this fast? Like,
no, because I actually just interviewed her a couple of days ago, and I had to ask her the same question. I was like, how did you come up with that? It's like you went into this, this Zen state for music creation. You just went and just started creating like crazy. She's like, yeah, I kind of did. I was like, wow. Like, I'm a musician too, and I'm like, I can't pull off half of what you did. And I do the same thing. I play rock, and I do retro style chip tunes, and it's like I can't pull that off. Like,
oh yeah, like my wife is not much of a gamer, but we'll listen to the soundtrack sometimes when we're driving, and she just like, I would just listen to this. She's like, this is the 80s music I would have adored.
Right.
And what's crazy too is when we started working with Megan, she'd already worked on a couple of different games and soundtracks, but I remember at the beginning of production looking her up on Spotify, and it's like, oh, okay, there was like, like a half a dozen albums or a couple singles. And then now after the game, like a year later, you look it up, it's like, oh, she's released like a dozen albums and 50 tracks since doing this game. And so the degree of how prolific she is just ridiculous.
Yeah, truly is.
Yeah, the very first thing that I saw of her was a video showing how to use a microwave door to make a movie trailer, like music, whatever, like Sting, just using that slamming of a microwave door.
Wow.
Yeah, I highly recommend trying to find that video.
I definitely will. Wow, that is amazing, man. That's
so there was actually something cool that came about in the gameplay from that too. So one of the things we knew was we wanted to just low-key drop full vocal songs in the middle of a stage, and that was something that I remember the first time I heard that was in one of the Wario Land games on Game Boy Color, I think, where you're just walking around. It's like, holy crap, I think someone's singing. And you're so used to only hearing that at the title screen or the credits, but it was so immersive. So I'm like, yeah, we should do some of that. We should just drop the vocals in. And so there's about one vocal song by her in each stage.
Yeah.
Later on in the game, you fight this rock star boss named Noise.
Yep.
And we kind of spun it all together, and we said, well, what if the songs you're hearing are this rock star just because she's so popular, everybody in River City listens to her. And then so we kind of like cast Megan as Noise, and usually every time you hear her music, you're seeing boomboxes playing it, you're seeing like posters and in the mall, like, coming soon, concert upcoming, all this stuff. So it's all like embracing this character. And then when you finally encounter her and fight her, you feel like you've got, we've been constructing this identity through the music for, the past several hours. And I think that was one of the most interesting things that wasn't planned from the beginning. But once we started hearing all those Megan vocal tracks, we're like, oh, she's got to be this character. She's got to be the music version of Noise.
Yeah. It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, and literally, like with the work that she did with the soundtrack, it's you know, I've had that when I was doing my review, I had the soundtrack on repeat. You know, everyone, like, even at we have a couple of FGC fighting game tournaments, and some of the music, we went from playing, you know, alternative and hip hop to just playing the soundtrack to River City Girls at a lot of our last couple tournaments, and everyone's like, yo, I need this. Like, where can I go and get it? I'm like, Spotify, Apple Music is here, it's there. Go support, share, retweet, whatever. Just play it, get it, and get the word out. So.
Oh, thanks, man.
It's funny. We had one of our coworkers' teenage daughter play this. We were just testing it with like new people and especially like a younger audience.
Mm-hmm.
Adam and I wrote down the same exact note without knowing it, that we watched the girl playing it and her head just kept bobbing up and down anytime she heard music from Megan.
Yeah, that's that's amazing.
It's a bop.
Yeah. You know what? If there's any DLC coming for the game, or if there's another sequel or anything, I think you guys and Megan, that has to happen. The fans,
oh yeah, no, I mean, I you know, there's a few people like Megan on the most of the tracks. All the art, all the character designs are by this amazing artist named Priscilla Hamby, and then our lead animator Kay did most of the character animation. There's all these people that we found over the course of this game that are total rock stars, and I think all of them at this point are totally, you know, one with what this brand is as far as Wayforward. So
it set a precedent.
Yeah, it elevated it far beyond what Bannon and I initially planned to do or even imagined in this game. So yeah, if we get to do DLC or a sequel or anything like that, we're definitely going to bring all these people back.
Awesome. And were you guys surprised at how critically acclaimed the response was to River City Girls? Because compared to other, I mean, I know River City games, they have been coming out, they're still coming out, but this is the first one to really, with the exception of the original River City on the NES, to really just, you know, burst into the Western audience the way it is. It's so mainstream.
I mean, I think the thing is, like, we love the games that ARC's been doing on the DS and 3DS, but they're very traditional River City games. Like, they make it full 3D background, and they put, you know, kind of their own bells and whistles on it, but they're effectively using like the NES sprites 50 games later. So what we knew early on is we didn't want to do that just because we wanted this one to, you know, nobody to say, hey, did I already play that? Is that the game from 3DS, or is that the DS one? Which one is this? We wanted to be, like, clearly have its own identity. So it's actually, like, for anybody who knows that brand, it's a pretty big deal that after 50 games, we're, you know, just throwing away that art style, other than, like, you know, the little tutorial Alex that pops up, and coming up with like a very vibrant, very different sort of like sprite style and animation style. But we felt that was necessary to bring in a new audience, because we knew that if we copied the old traditional style, it wouldn't really expand beyond what the previous games were able to do. Yeah. And so, you know, the goal was always to do something really flashy and colorful and modern and appealing that would get a new audience, but then we have all those lore bits and characters to appeal to the existing audience. So hopefully get the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And that's kind of like the, you could actually cross-compare like Double Dragon Neon to Double Dragon 4, whereas Double Dragon 4 was very traditional in the NES, you know, within the original NES continuity. It didn't really draw in a lot of newer fans, but a lot of the older heads that grew up with it, with the exception of, with the difference being like with Double Dragon Neon drew in a lot of new people with its art style, you know, and just overall aesthetics. So yeah, yeah.
And I think that's just kind of the Wayforward style too. Like we'll do games like DuckTales Remastered where it's trying to be close to like a 1-to-1, but unless we're doing that, we kind of like just, you know, winging it and doing our own style and you know, rethinking the brands and stuff. So this is basically, at the end of the day, just the most Wayforward-y version of like a Kunio-kun River City game, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I gotta ask you guys, like, what's it like, you know, at Wayforward? What's it like working there? Like, what's the typical day like for you guys, especially within your roles?
Well, there's no talking allowed.
Yeah, there's none at all. This is so, like, I forget how to talk sometimes.
We're outside right now.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's I've been here for 15 years, and it is a crazy madhouse of very talented people. And I think part of what helps it structurally, helps our games be weird and stand out, is the level of trust of management. I worked at some places before Wayforward where it's kind of like management and the top creative individuals will make all the fun decisions, and then everybody else just works for them on each game. One of the first games I worked on, I animated for 6 months, and they said, here's your spreadsheet. And that's all I did, was just work from a spreadsheet for 6 months. And there was no real input beyond that. But, Wayforward, like some of the craziest stuff, even in this game, was suggested halfway through or suggested by our programmers or animators. So it just, there's just an openness for ideas. And I think, once Bannon and I set the tone of this game and said, okay, here's how it looks, here's how it sounds, then getting the rest of the team to contribute ideas and contribute funny moments and cool little personality stuff really just helped elevate it. Like, for example, one of the late additions was all the little NPCs standing around. That was something that Bannon and Kay added, where you just swipe at them and they kind of block a little bit, but they just go back to their phone. It's so just fun and immersive. And that was not in the initial design documents or anything. It was just something where, along the way it was like, hey, what if we did this? Wouldn't that be funny?
Wow. That is awesome.
I mean, this is my first professional video game job. Like, Underground was a Kickstarter thing. That was my first time ever doing a video game. So this is my only experience. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you come in, you just get to be creative, and you make video games for a living. It's quite enjoyable.
Isn't that the dream, though?
I mean, according to, like, little 7-year-old Bannon, yeah.
No, I mean, working. I think just working in the gaming industry is such a dream job, and I don't work in it. Like, I'm not with a company. I am an independent content creator and games journalist. But at the same time, I get to work with so many different companies. I get to speak with people such as yourselves that are making the games, and the PR teams, and the people who make the music for the games, the people that voice the characters in games, and it's such an amazing industry to be in, and it's unlike anything else. And it seems like everyone that I've talked to absolutely loves it. And I think for me, the pinnacle was when I got to go to E3 this year. I got flown to E3 by PDP, Performance Design Products, and it was truly eye-opening to get to meet so many people in the industry. Like,
you didn't say hello?
I was okay. Hey,
We're done.
I have to. Hey,
he's going out the door now.
Where I can't speak.
I have to say this. Look, nobody prepped me for E3. I asked them, what do I wear? They said, oh yeah, just wear something business casual. Some loafers or dress shoes and some jeans and a blazer. So I wore that, and I didn't realize how much walking I'm gonna have to be doing. So my feet were killing me by the end of the first day.
Yeah, it's still amazing. And I mean, especially anytime we can have one of our games on the floor. So, I mean, we debuted River City Girls publicly at Anime Expo, and I spent so much time just standing 20 feet off, just watching people play it and watching where they were laughing, watching where they were getting stuck. And yeah, I mean, watching, we worked on this game for over a year. And so you enjoy it. I know I enjoy playing it. I know I enjoy Bannon's combat. I know people enjoy my writing and stuff, but you don't have really like a perspective outside of the team and the people that you play test. So, seeing people react to it, seeing people pull off the moves the way you want or laugh at the jokes that you put in there is just so satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest reaction, I think, showing it off at PAX was people stomping their buddies.
Oh man, and that's the other thing too I want to ask you about, since you guys are in the gaming industry, like, what is a side of the industry that we as fans don't normally get to see? Like, it's such as like the hard work that you folks put into your games and the meetings, working with different publishers and companies. Like, What is the behind the scenes like? Is it stressful? Is it fun?
I mean,
is it a blender of both?
I think maybe there's an over assumption of we're all working 120 hours a week and killing ourselves and eating ramen and stuff like that. I mean, there is definitely crunch periods, but it's not, we're not, our team is not killing themselves to get this game done because if you plan it in a way that it's based on how much time you have, how much resources you have, most productions can be pretty comfortable. And so that definitely was the case on this. You don't want to, put so much stuff in your game and overscope it to where you're destroying the energy and morale of your team, because then you're not going to get a, creative team. I think that maybe kind of people are thinking like, oh, everyone must kill themselves. If you do good planning and you've got a good producer overseeing it, then it's usually pretty tolerable. And the other thing is there's, we talk about like the exciting stuff, but well, I was going to say like what like with every game you're starting basically from scratch. So, we'll talk about like, oh, it was so fun to do the music like this, or stomping the character back to life. For every one of those, it's me and Bannon saying, okay, here's the flow chart for death and respawn. Here's the Excel chart for stat leveling up. Here's the menu flow for the front end. And here's how you delete and copy a save file. So, all of that stuff you have to do. Everything that doesn't exist yet has to become a task.
But then on top of that, when you do go, oh, we're going to revive, how long is that going to take our programmer? That's going to take them 3 weeks. We need 3 weeks of their time. The animator needs to do this. So yeah, it's a lot of planning.
Yeah. And I think like what was some of the most fun stuff in the game is those contributions that the team members came up with working in the structure we did. So like Jeremy Hobbs did all our menus. Really creative guy. If you go through the front end and you like all the little charming animations of them, or when tutorials pop up, that's all him and Joel, our VFX guy, working together. And so some of the funniest stuff, like when you get a tutorial and at the bottom it just says okay cool, that was just what he put in the temp, and I'm like, hey, that seems fun. And he asked me and Ben like, well, do you want me to just change it to okay? We're like, no, that seems cool. And we've seen so many people in playthroughs laugh like, okay, cool. Like they just love the little personality of advancing the menu. So yeah, little things like that are fun bits where everybody on the team can kind of throw in their own little creativity on top of what's already planned.
Awesome. And I know we're pressed for time, so I got just 2-3 more questions I want to ask you guys, but I really want to know, okay, what about gaming has you guys passionate? Like, what was that defining moment where you knew, okay, I'm a gamer, I want to do this, like I need to be in the industry? Like, what was that moment for you guys?
I mean, this is something I've been doing design-wise since I was a kid. Like, I used to have, I would take pieces of graph paper. I would take about, I would say, like an inch or two at the bottom and make like a kind of menu bar. And I would draw it like, it would be like the Predator. And the Predator, you're playing as Arnold, and you have to collect keys and bombs and stuff. And it would be a maze on this graph paper. And so, like, if you're going through the maze and you get to a door, it's like, well, this door needs a key. Or this, like, you come across a block, you need a bomb. So you have, like, a little check mark thing off to the side to show how many keys you have and how many bombs. Like, just designing games is something I've always wanted to do.
Yeah, and same for me. And I think it's funny, if you talk to most of the lead programmers and directors here, I think they were doing that stuff before we even knew it was a job. I just remember innately just copying stats from Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest as a kid, and copying pixel art on graph paper again. And it's just something just factoidal. You just kind of are immersed with just looking at what you're playing on Atari or NES and wanting to kind of dive into that structure. As far as like, I just totally fell into this career. I happened to, most of my background is in writing, and then for a short spell, I started pixel animating for fun and got hired as an animator. And then very quickly, I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be writing again. So I switched over to designing direction. But yeah, I just kind of fell into it. And what I love about Wayforward is, like, there are no rules of what a game is. So we'll do games here that are just classic gameplay and just very arcadey, and then we'll do games where they're almost entirely like story narrative driven and there's very little gameplay. Like, it's really all over the place. The main thing is just connecting with the player. So sometimes that's a more arcadey, like, shallower experience, and sometimes it's a really deep experience. But doesn't have anything real time, and you know, the flexibility to kind of bounce between both styles here has been really fascinating.
Awesome. And Bannon, what about you? Like, how did you get into the industry?
I mean, like I said before, so River City Ransom, I wanted to learn how to do pixel art. I had no idea how to do it. So I started downloading a bunch of GIFs for River City Ransom.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, okay, these are really simple, but very expressive little characters. And then I was like, well, let me just jump to Street Fighter 3 animation. And I opened that up in Photoshop, and it would break down the entire GIF. I was like, all right, that's how they animate. That's how I kind of learned. I was like, okay, that's how Capcom did it for Street Fighter 3. Let me see if I can apply this to these more simple little River City Ransom characters.
Mm-hmm.
From there, I was trying to find somebody to help me out program this. Like, it was just going to be like a little fan game. And after like a year or two of me doing pixels and stuff and trying to make this little River City Ransom fan game, I ran into a guy online who actually had the rights to River City Ransom. So from there, I mean, it snowballed like within a week, and we started setting up the Kickstarter for River City Ransom Underground. So that was my first just foray into it. I just kind of dove headfirst into this. And then from there, they just found me.
Yeah, I think I started interacting with Bannon on Twitter, and we got him in and talked with him. I remember at one point we got geeky where we were talking about like the NES version of Dragon's Lair, and he knew about all the stuff that we were talking about. It's like, all right, this guy's got the DNA. He should be here. Yeah, because all of the directors at Wayforward just have a gross, absurd, encyclopedic knowledge of like 8-bit, 4-bit, 16-bit games. And so whenever we're creating a game, someone will say like, what if the boss did that? It's like, oh, you mean like ActRaiser? Oh, you mean like Flashback? Oh, you mean like this? Like, we're just throwing
that actually helps.
Yeah.
Like, to actually be able to say, we should treat this more like, like Chippendale Rescue Rangers picking up instead of Super Mario Brothers 2 picking up items.
Yes, exactly.
Oh man. See, if we ever cross paths in person, I feel like we're just gonna get a couple of drinks.
We're gonna hug it out.
Like, seriously, we're gonna hug it out. We're gonna get a couple of drinks and just talk about games. Like, I'm in my element now. I get to nerd out about games I just grew up with, and like you said, like this weird encyclopedic knowledge of stuff that you can't apply anywhere else, but it's useful in gaming. We're gaming historians.
Yeah, it's not something you really learn. It's just like through osmosis of playing these games over your entire life.
So down to my last two questions. Again, I'm trying to be super respectful of your time.
Thank you.
So are we ever going to see possibly Masako and Kyoko ever interacting with Shantae?
That's interesting. I know the fans want it. They're very vocal about it. We talked about it for the first one, and it was just one of those things where, because, like I said, we're doing so many things in the game, so many characters and stuff, it didn't come together. But it's something that we know the fans suggest a lot, and something we've discussed internally. And if we do more with this version of River City, I would love to see the Half Genie hero make an appearance.
I mean, it just makes sense.
Yeah, Bannon's working in Sequin Land right now. He's on the Shantae team.
Oh, I see, and this is why I got to have you guys back on, because I'd love to talk about Shantae 5. And I know it just released on Apple Arcade, I believe.
Yes, it did.
And I need to talk to my wife, because I think she downloaded it day one and she's been on it. So knowing her, she needs to be on this podcast and talk to you guys about it, because she's a fan of Shantae from the original Game Boy Color initial one to all the way up to now. So it's insane. I also want to ask you guys are we ever going to see a new Double Dragon game that takes a more of a serious post-apocalyptic Mad Max Fist of the North Star style as the original idea, or will it be more like, is it more likely to see it in Double Dragon Neon style? It's
funny you mentioned that, because we were just discussing this, some of the directors the other day, because now we're in, there's so many different ways that could be approached. And, is it, we've got Billy and Jimmy and Marion in River City. So is that the style of them now? Or is it the same as it was in Neon? Or like you said, does it go darker and more epic and serious, like, Double Dragon 2, Double Dragon 3? I think it would really come down to which director ends up doing it if we did another Double Dragon game, because all the games are kind of just reflective of the personality of the people behind it. You play River City Girls, and it's, all the dialogue is the goofy dad jokes that I do, and all the combat is super satisfying chain combos that Bannon knows. So, yeah, I don't know. It's funny, though, you mentioned that, because we were just talking the other day, like, hey, if we did another Double Dragon now post-RCG, which version would it be? And there isn't a clear answer. I think we would need it to get greenlit, and then we would, start making decisions from there.
Have you guys seen the fan game Legend of the Double Dragon, where it takes on it basically is kind of what the original vision of Double Dragon or Super Double Dragon or Return of Double Dragon was supposed to be, and it's got like I'm actually friends with the guy who he did all the sprite work. He's literally built the game. It took him 10 years to do it, but he's built it from the ground up using the Beast of Rage engine. It's got style switchability. You can switch between Double Dragon 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, I have seen this, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, I saw that and I was playing it. I'm like, man, this makes me want Double Dragon back again.
He's using the Beats of Rage engine?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would say, it's funny, your last two questions, because the two things we're getting asked more than anything else probably since River City Girls came out is, one, are you going to put Shantae in it? And two, are you guys going to do another Double Dragon Neon? So
you're just one of the many.
All right. So I guess one of my last questions is we can ask this other one on another podcast, but I want to ask you guys, like, what advice would you give to the audience here that would be interested in getting into either video game design or gaming industry as a whole?
It's not easy. It isn't just get Game Maker and just start throwing stuff together and you're like, I'm a game designer. It's like, no, it took me years to figure out how to do any of this stuff. And I failed miserably many, many times over and over. So yeah, it is just study it, play games, take from the games, like, why are you enjoying this game? See how they did it, break down what makes this game fun that you're playing currently, and then figure out how is this fun? Why is this fun? What did it take to actually put this into a game? And if you come up with a game idea, like, anytime somebody has a game idea, they like to run it by me, and I kind of break it down going, that doesn't work because of this. This does work because of this. Like, you can't just be like, oh, I'm going to make a game where I could fly through buildings and smash things and blow up cities. I was like, then what happens to the city when you're done? Like, do you just have an empty playfield? Like, it's stuff like that. Just break down games, essentially.
I think I would add on to that, the most critical thing for somebody to gain experience is to finish projects, because anybody can start coming up with characters, get some basic mobility, but it's that plus what is the loop for save conditions, what are the menus, how do I do my quest system, how does the game experience begin and end. That's kind of the correlation. If someone's main goal is to become like a director like me or Bannon, that's something all the directors at Wayforward can do well, is I can think out every single piece of what will be needed for a game. So I would recommend, that's why you talk to game developers, and they always say, start small. Like, your first project, all of our first projects always is some massive RPG that we never finish, but, try and start with something that's like a Tetris clone. Try and start with something that's really small so that you can finish it, so you can wrap a project up, so you can test it, so you can bug test it, and you can see what the full experience is. That's going to be the most critical experience you can, is learning how to complete a project. And then that's really all it takes. If you complete a couple of projects, and then you're going to get more and more ambitious, you're going to start teaming up with other people who have experience. And then, either you're going to apply to companies, or companies are just going to notice you because your fan games are awesome. So come up with projects, complete them, and then just keep knocking that out and work on project after project. And that's that's the easiest way to get in. When people apply here, very, very, seldom is it like, well, what school did you go to? Where's your history? It's just like, if we can get a sense of somebody just being really capable and really interesting and able to, make products for us, we'll hire them.
Awesome. All right. I lied. I have a final question for you guys.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought we had that level of trust, but yeah.
Right. Did you have fun
with this interview? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, I thought it was okay. Bannon's been in the corner with his arms folded the whole time.
Ooh.
Oh, I've got a bumpy face right now.
No, this is great, and yeah, thank you. It was fun to kind of go under the hood a little bit, because a lot of the interviews we do are just like,
surface level.
Like, what are the characters and the combat and stuff? But anytime we get to talk about the process, because we want to see more people in the industry. We want to see more people come to Wayforward, and
that just means more games.
Yeah, exactly. Like we are the bottleneck here at this company. Like the number of games Wayforward can make is the number of talented directors and lead programmers and producers we have. So like if you're inspired, if you want to make a game, just start making a game, make something awesome, do it however you want, team up with people who can do the parts you can't do, and just get stuff done.
Yeah, if it was easy, everybody would be making a game. It's not going to be just grab a thing and start making a game. It's like, it takes effort, it takes time.
Yeah, I mean, anything worth having is worth putting effort and fighting for.
Yep.
Otherwise, they would have just flown those eagles right into Mountain Doom and threw that.
Right.
I still think they could have done that.
Yeah. Well, all right. I know you guys have to go. I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I enjoyed this conversation. I know the audience is going to love it. And tell people where they can find you on social media. And, we'll end it out.
I am the only Bannon Rudis in the world. You can find me anywhere.
You can find both of us on Twitter, Adam Tierney WF, and we're also, if you just follow Wayforward at Wayforward, we've got our, we're in heavy promotion mode for River City, for Shantae, so you'll find all the coolest, fan art and stuff like that. But yeah, we're everywhere. Wayforward's on Twitter, Facebook, everywhere.
All right. And with that being said, people, you can find this episode of the Kasanova Podcast available on all podcasting outlets, from iHeart Radio to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. Just search the Kasanova Podcast. If you want to support the podcast, you can also support us on patreon.com/Mekel Kasanova. And with that being said, you can also catch it on youtube.com/Mekel Kasanova. And now we are signing out. Have a good one.
Hey, did you enjoy this episode of the Kasanova Podcast? Well, I'm sure you did. And since you did, and you're wondering where else you can find it on every podcasting outlet. Yes, that includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Launchpad DM by Podcast One, and so much more. And the only thing I ask of you is, if you truly enjoyed it, even if you didn't enjoy it, please leave a rating and tell us what you thought of it, what you like, what you didn't like, and everything in between. And also, if you're looking for video formats of this podcast and many more, you'll be able to find them on youtube.com/Mekel Kasanova, as well as on twitch.tv/Mekel Kasanova, and new episodes every single Monday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, with that being said, this is Mekel Kasanova, Hawaii's favorite YouTuber. I am signing out. You guys have a great one.